When a suspect is taken into police custody, the threat is supposed to be over. But in rare cases, that belief turned deadly. Across the United States, a small number of suspects managed to do the unthinkable. They killed police officers after arrest while being detained. Tonight, we examine the most brutal real cases of suspects who killed police while in custody, starting with one that changed procedure forever. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button and like the video. This is Verdict Vault. Stay with us. Hollis Daniels III. On the night of November 17, 2017, inside one of the safest places imaginable, a police station, a single suspect turned routine detention into one of the most shocking law enforcement killings in recent U.S. history. Daniels was a 19-year-old student at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. Earlier that evening, campus police had stopped him after officers noticed suspicious behavior near a dormitory. When questioned, Daniels admitted to possessing marijuana and was arrested without incident. He did not resist, he did not threaten anyone. He was cooperative enough that officers believed there was no immediate danger. That assumption would prove fatal. Daniels was transported to the Texas Tech University Police Department building for booking. His hands were cuffed behind his back. He was searched, but not thoroughly enough to detect what he had hidden on his person. He was placed in a holding area inside the station, just steps away from armed officers who had no idea they were about to face an attack from someone already restrained. Officer Floyd East Jr., a 46-year-old veteran campus police officer, was on duty that night. East had served in law enforcement for years and was well respected by his colleagues. Like many officers, he was trained to treat compliant suspects as lower risk, especially inside controlled environments like police buildings. According to investigators, Daniels asked Officer East a seemingly harmless question, whether he could use the restroom. East agreed and began escorting him down a hallway inside the station. That moment changed everything. Somehow, Daniels managed to slip one hand free from his handcuffs. Investigators later determined that the cuffs had been applied correctly, but Daniels exploited a gap that officers had not noticed. With one hand free, he lunged at Officer East inside the station itself. What followed happened in seconds. While Officer East completed the required paperwork, Daniels was not handcuffed. He had apparently slipped one hand free and had concealed a stolen .45 caliber handgun in his pants, a firearm that would turn a routine arrest into tragedy. Then, without warning, Daniels drew the weapon. In a single horrifying instant, he fired a shot into the back of Officer East's head. The sound of the gun echoed through the campus police station. Officer East collapsed immediately. What should have been a controlled environment, a place of authority, a place of safety, became a scene of chaos and death. The idea that a suspect could kill an officer inside a police station sent shockwaves across Texas and the entire law enforcement community. This was not a traffic stop gone wrong. This was not an ambush in the field. This was custody, the point at which control is supposed to be absolute. After the shooting, Daniels fled the building, still armed. Texas Tech University was immediately placed on lockdown. Students were told to shelter in place as police searched the campus and surrounding areas for an armed suspect who had just killed an officer. For several hours, Daniels remained at large. He was eventually captured by state troopers in a parking lot in a nearby county. Authorities confirmed that he was taken into custody without further incident. The weapon used in the killing was recovered. As investigators began piecing together what happened, disturbing details emerged. Daniels had a history of erratic behavior. Court records and police reports revealed that he had been experiencing severe mental health issues in the months leading up to the shooting. According to prosecutors, Daniels later admitted that he wanted to be arrested that night, not to surrender, but to get close enough to an officer to kill him. In statements to investigators, Daniels allegedly said he believed killing a police officer would lead to his own death, either through execution or police use of force. Prosecutors described the attack as intentional and premeditated, even though it unfolded during what appeared to be a routine arrest. Officer East never stood a chance. The killing raised immediate questions about custodial procedures, handcuff protocols, and the risks officers face even after a suspect is restrained. Law enforcement experts noted that while escapes from handcuffs are not impossible, especially when suspects are determined, physically capable, or willing to cause harm. In 2018, a Lubbock County grand jury indicted Hollis Daniels III on capital murder charges. Prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty, citing the fact that the victim was a police officer killed in the line of duty. The trial drew intense attention. Inside the courtroom, jurors heard detailed testimony about the moments leading up to Officer East's death. Surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and expert analysis painted a clear picture of how quickly control can be lost, even in secure environments. Defense attorneys argued that Daniels suffered severe mental illness and should not face execution. Prosecutors countered that Daniels understood exactly what he was doing and had deliberately engineered the situation to kill an officer. In 2023, the jury returned a verdict, guilty of capital murder. When it came time for sentencing, jurors chose life in prison without the possibility of parole, rather than the death penalty. Daniels was sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. For the family of Officer Floyd East Jr., the verdict brought little comfort. East left behind loved ones, colleagues, and a campus community that trusted him to protect them. Memorials were held across Texas. The case of Hollis Daniels III remains one of the most chilling examples of how custody does not always equal control.
Brian Nichols. On March 11, 2005, Nichols, a 33-year-old defendant facing rape charges, was being held at the Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta, Georgia. He had been transported from jail and brought to a holding area to change into civilian clothing before entering the courtroom. That's when everything went wrong. While Sheriff's Deputy Cynthia Hall was supervising the clothing change, Nichols suddenly overpowered her. In a violent struggle inside the courthouse holding area, Nichols wrestled Deputy Hall to the ground, seized her Glock service pistol, and brutally beat her. The attack left Hall with severe injuries and permanent brain damage. She survived, but would never fully recover. Now armed inside a courthouse, Nichols moved freely through the building. His first stop was Judge Roland Barnes's chambers. Judge Barnes, a veteran jurist respected for his years on the bench, was inside when Nichols entered. Without warning, he opened fire at close range. Judge Barnes was killed instantly inside his own chambers, a space meant to be one of the most secure areas of the courthouse. Nichols continued his rampage. Court reporter Julie Brandau was at her desk when Nichols encountered her. She was unarmed. She had no means of defense. Nichols shot and killed her as he moved through the courthouse, leaving another innocent victim behind. By now, the courthouse was in chaos. Courtrooms were being evacuated. People ran for their lives. Alarms echoed through the building as law enforcement scrambled to respond to an active shooter, one who had gained his weapon from inside custody. Nichols fled the courthouse and made his way onto the street. Outside, he encountered Sergeant Hoyt Teasley of the Fulton County Sheriff's Office. Teasley, a 43-year-old deputy sergeant, attempted to stop Nichols during his escape. Nichols shot and killed him near the courthouse entrance before disappearing into downtown Atlanta. 3 people had now been shot, all dead. Nichols vanished into the city, triggering one of the largest manhunts in Atlanta history. Law enforcement agencies at the local, state, and federal levels flooded the area. A $65,000 reward was announced for information leading to his capture. But the violence wasn't over. During his escape, Nichols carjacked a vehicle and drove to a suburban neighborhood. There, he forced his way into the home of David Wilhelm, a federal agent with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. Nichols shot and killed Agent Wilhelm, then stole his badge, service weapon, and pickup truck, extending the manhunt and adding a 4th murder victim. In total, 4 people were killed: Judge Roland Barnes, court reporter Julie Brandau, Sergeant Hoyt Teasley, and Agent David G. Wilhelm. Deputy Cynthia Hall survived, but with life-altering injuries. Nichols was finally captured on March 12, 2005, after a woman recognized him and alerted authorities. He was taken into custody without further violence. What followed was a long and complex legal process. Prosecutors charged Nichols with multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, carjacking, and other violent felonies. Given the scope of the killings, the death penalty was initially sought, but the trial would not be straightforward. Nichols' defense team raised serious questions about his mental health. Evidence presented in court showed a long history of psychological instability. Experts testified about his mental state leading up to the courthouse attack. In 2009, Nichols entered a plea agreement. He pled guilty to all charges and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, avoiding the death penalty. As part of the plea, he formally accepted responsibility for the murders of Judge Roland Barnes, Julie Brandau, Deputy Hoyt Teasley, and Agent David Wilhelm. Deputy Cynthia Hall survived, but with life-altering injuries. The Fulton County Courthouse attack forced sweeping changes in courthouse security nationwide. Procedures for inmate transport, clothing changes, and officer positioning were re-examined. The case became a stark warning. Custody does not eliminate threat, it can conceal it.
Esteban Carpio. On April 13, 2005, Esteban Carpio was brought to the Providence Police Department headquarters in Rhode Island for questioning in connection with the brutal murder of a local businessman, Craig Anderson. Anderson had been beaten, stabbed, and left to die inside his jewelry store. Investigators believed robbery was the motive, and Carpio had quickly emerged as a key suspect. At the time, Carpio was a 30-year-old Honduran immigrant with a criminal history that included violent offenses. He was known to police, but there was not yet enough evidence to formally charge him with murder. Instead, detectives decided to question him inside headquarters, believing the controlled environment would keep everyone safe. That belief was wrong. Detective Sergeant James L. Allen, a 17-year veteran of the Providence Police Department, was one of the officers assigned to question Carpio. Allen was experienced, respected, and known for his calm demeanor during interrogations. He had handled violent suspects before. Nothing about Carpio's behavior initially suggested what was about to happen. The interrogation took place inside a small interview room at police headquarters. Carpio was seated across from Allen. No restraints were used. No weapon was visible. Officers were nearby, but not inside the room. According to investigators, Carpio appeared cooperative at first. He answered questions. He maintained eye contact. There were no raised voices, no visible signs of agitation. Then, without warning, everything changed. Carpio suddenly lunged at Detective Allen, knocking him to the floor. The attack was immediate and ferocious. Before Allen could react, Carpio began beating him and strangling him with his bare hands. The struggle spilled out of the interrogation room and into the hallway of police headquarters. Other officers heard the commotion and rushed toward the scene. What they encountered was chaos. Carpio had overpowered Allen and was actively trying to kill him. Officers attempted to intervene, but Carpio fought them off, displaying what prosecutors later described as extraordinary strength and determination. During the struggle, Carpio managed to disarm Allen, taking control of the detective's service weapon. In the confined space of the hallway, with officers and civilians nearby, Carpio fired multiple shots. Detective Sergeant James L. Allen was struck and killed inside the building where he had worked for nearly 2 decades. The gunfire echoed through police headquarters. Panic spread instantly. Officers scrambled to evacuate the building as Carpio fled, now armed and having just killed a detective inside one of the most secure law enforcement facilities in the state. Within minutes, a massive manhunt was underway. Carpio escaped police headquarters and ran into a nearby neighborhood. The search ended several hours later. Carpio was located hiding inside a nearby residence. When officers attempted to arrest him, he resisted again, leading to another violent confrontation. This time, police used deadly force. Carpio was shot multiple times and critically wounded, but survived. He was taken to a hospital under heavy guard. The fallout from the killing was immediate and severe.
Detective Sergeant James Allen's death sent shockwaves through Rhode Island's law enforcement community. Officers across the state attended his funeral. Carpio was charged with multiple crimes, including capital murder for the killing of Detective Sergeant Allen. The trial was long and emotionally charged. Jurors heard testimony detailing the brutality of the attack and the desperate attempts by officers to save their colleague. Surveillance footage from inside headquarters showed parts of the struggle. Medical examiners described the injuries Allen suffered, confirming that he had been strangled and shot. The defense argued that Carpio suffered from mental illness and acted impulsively. Prosecutors rejected that claim, pointing to his actions before and after the killing as evidence of calculated intent. In 2006, Esteban Carpio was convicted of capital murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the harshest sentence available under Rhode Island law, which does not have the death penalty. Today, Carpio remains incarcerated, serving multiple life sentences. Detective Sergeant James L. Allen is remembered as a dedicated officer who lost his life doing what thousands of detectives do every day, asking questions in a room where danger is assumed to be minimal. The case forced law enforcement agencies nationwide to reevaluate interrogation procedures, especially when dealing with violent suspects who are not yet formally under arrest.
Gary Rowland. On July 23, 2018, Gary Rowland was taken into custody by deputies in Whitley County, Kentucky on outstanding warrants that included allegations of domestic violence and terroristic threatening. He did not resist arrest. He did not cause a scene. By all outward appearances, he was cooperative. Deputies transported him to the Whitley County Sheriff's Office for processing. As with countless arrests before, officers believed the situation was under control. It wasn't. While at the sheriff's office, Rowland requested a cigarette. According to investigators, deputies allowed him to step outside the building for a supervised smoke break. He was not handcuffed at the time, but officers believed he posed no immediate threat. He had already been searched. No weapon had been found. That assumption would prove fatal. Standing just outside the sheriff's office, Rowland suddenly reached into his clothing and pulled out a concealed handgun, a firearm that had somehow gone undetected during the earlier search. Without warning, he raised the weapon and opened fire. Chief Deputy Jody Cash was struck. Cash, a veteran law enforcement officer and one of the most senior deputies in the county, collapsed from his injuries. The shooting happened in full view of other officers, just steps from the building meant to represent authority and safety. There was no time to react. Deputies immediately returned fire. A brief but violent exchange followed outside the sheriff's office. Gary Rowland was shot multiple times and killed at the scene. Chief Deputy Jody Cash was rushed to the hospital, but his wounds were fatal. He was pronounced dead shortly afterward. The entire incident unfolded in moments, a routine courtesy extended to a suspect, turning into a deadly ambush. The killing of Chief Deputy Jody Cash sent shockwaves through Kentucky's law enforcement community. Officers across the state struggled to comprehend how an armed suspect could fire on police while already in custody, outside a sheriff's office, under supervision. As investigators worked to reconstruct the shooting, troubling details emerged. Gary Rowland had concealed the handgun on his person, despite having been searched earlier. Authorities later acknowledged that the weapon had not been detected during the initial pat-down. How exactly it was missed became a central question in the investigation. Law enforcement officials explained that concealment methods, including placement in waistbands, under clothing, or in hard-to-detect areas, can sometimes defeat standard searches, especially when suspects are cooperative and do not raise suspicion. But in this case, the consequences were catastrophic. In the days following the shooting, memorials appeared outside the sheriff's office. American flags were lowered. Fellow officers stood watch as residents gathered to mourn a man who had spent his career protecting them. The case also reignited a national conversation within law enforcement circles about officer safety during custodial privileges, particularly activities like smoke breaks, restroom use, or brief moments outside secure facilities. Experts emphasized a harsh reality. Once a suspect is given freedom of movement, even briefly, the risk calculus changes entirely. Gary Rowland's actions demonstrated that custody is not a single moment, but a continuous condition, one that can fail if vigilance drops for even a second.
Jeremy Powell. On January 7, 2023, Jeremy Powell was brought to the Bay St. Louis Police Department in Mississippi for questioning in connection with a homicide investigation. Powell was a suspect, but he had not yet been formally charged. Like many interrogations conducted every day across the country, officers believed the controlled setting would limit risk. Detective Eric Tyrone Smith was assigned to question him. Smith was a veteran law enforcement officer with the Bay St. Louis Police Department. Colleagues described him as calm, professional, and experienced, the kind of detective trusted to handle difficult suspects without escalation. He had conducted countless interviews before, including with violent individuals. Nothing about that morning suggested it would end in tragedy. Powell was seated inside an interrogation room at police headquarters. He was not handcuffed, no physical restraints were used. As is common during questioning, officers relied on the assumption that proximity, training, and awareness were enough to maintain control. They weren't. According to investigators, at some point during the interrogation, Powell suddenly attacked Detective Smith. The assault was swift and unexpected. Powell overpowered the detective inside the room, initiating a violent struggle that left Smith vulnerable. During the fight, Powell managed to gain control of Detective Smith's service weapon. What followed happened in seconds. Powell fired the gun inside the interrogation room, fatally shooting Detective Eric Tyrone Smith. The sound of gunfire echoed through the police building, triggering an immediate emergency response from other officers. But before anyone could intervene, the situation escalated again. After killing the detective, Jeremy Powell turned the weapon on himself and took his own life inside the same room. By the time officers reached the interrogation room, both men were down. Emergency medical personnel were called, but Detective Smith was pronounced dead at the scene. Powell was also pronounced deceased shortly afterward. The entire incident unfolded inside a room specifically designed for questioning, not combat. News of the killing sent shockwaves through Mississippi's law enforcement community. Detective Smith had no opportunity to react once Powell launched the attack. Prosecutors and police officials later confirmed that the assault was sudden, violent, and overwhelming. There was no prolonged argument, no warning signs that could have prompted officers to intervene sooner. Powell's actions ended the investigation into the homicide he was suspected of, but at an unimaginable cost. Detective Eric Tyrone Smith left behind family members, fellow officers, and a department shaken by the loss. Vigils were held. Patrol cars lined the streets in tribute. Law enforcement agencies across Mississippi and beyond expressed solidarity and grief. Investigators later stated that Powell appeared to understand the gravity of his situation. While no manifesto or detailed plan was recovered, authorities concluded that Powell's actions were deliberate and final. He chose to kill the detective rather than face the legal consequences awaiting him. In the wake of Detective Smith's death, departments across the region reviewed interrogation policies. Some agencies began requiring additional officers present during questioning of violent suspects. Others revisited restraint policies, especially when suspects are emotionally unstable or facing serious charges. But no policy can eliminate risk entirely. The killing of Detective Eric Tyrone Smith serves as one of the starkest reminders that custody does not neutralize intent. If these stories moved you, share your thoughts below in the comment. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell if you want more stories that challenge our ideas about crime, punishment, and humanity. Thank you for watching Verdict Vault. Until next time, stay thoughtful, stay compassionate, and keep seeking the truth.